Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host, Leanne Hughes.
Okay, I'd like to welcome back to the First Time Facilitator podcast, Riz McDonald from Found Legal. It's Found with 2 Ds. Riz was on episode 96. We're talking all things legal, and I've brought her back. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Leanne. I'm glad to be back.
We have an espresso coffee episode. So what's happening, and I'm sure you're finding it as well as a lawyer, is you're getting a lot of people wanting to pick your brains and find out more, particularly with things moving so rapidly during COVID. And we've got a Facebook community called the Flip Chart, and there was a question on there, and it was around a couple of things. So one was security concerns when using Zoom. So I might just read out a bit of that that post. Is anyone including information to address potential or perceived risks around using platforms such as Zoom? Just to give an example, if someone recorded a session without your knowledge or someone felt there was a privacy issue, what do people think? I'm running some virtual workshops and group coaching sessions, and I want to make sure that I'm covered. So we might just talk about that one first.
Yeah, sure. So it depends on the nature of the coaching workshops as well, whether there's any kind of personal sensitive information that's being collected. In my view, look, you've got the Privacy Act, and this is potentially a big subject when you sort of start drilling down into it. So the 15-minute bites is probably going to be difficult to try and condense all of that. So I'll do my best in trying to extrapolate a few things. So yes, there are, as we all know, Zoom is having some problems. They're like they on the one hand, their own success is coming to haunt them, and they are working, I understand, on trying to fix things from a security perspective. But at the end of the day, though, if you've got a relationship with a client where you're going to have sessions that you can only provide via something like Zoom, it's probably best to set that out in your terms and conditions and make sure that they consent through those terms and conditions to them being recorded. And you can also add an extra layer, because I believe Zoom allows you to add some language around, that you're recording this for training and educational purposes, so to speak, or there's some language that you can use to do that so that they're aware of it in that call. I also understand that the person that scheduled the call is the only one who can record the call. However, that doesn't mean to say that the person on the other end of the call can't use another device to record it. Whether that's legal or not to do that is complex. There's basically the states and territories all have different legislation around recording of calls. In some states, like Queensland, they do allow it, and in others they don't, and there's also certain nuances around that as well. In my view, it is better to be safe than sorry, and also it's better to have a good relationship with your client by being open and upfront about what you're doing and how you're going to do it. With regards to Zoom and the security concerns, obviously, that's not something you can control. So you just need to make sure that your liability is limited, and you've made it clear that that's what you're going to be using and what you're going to do to mitigate any potential risks, because I believe Zoom are allowing and incorporating, these things are changing, by the way, day by day, but they're now allowing passwords, requirements to meetings, etc. So it would be worthwhile for the person who posed the question to maybe consider those options as well, to reduce or minimize the risk for any potential third party to jump in and listen to the call as well. So there are ways and means in which you can protect yourself and your client, But in my view, it's always best in terms of consent to just inform them and give them that opportunity. And given the nature of what that coaching involves, I think it's useful for both the coach and the client for there to be recordings, because presumably the coach will be sharing those recordings with the client to enable progress and growth over the course of the coaching sessions. So it's a useful exercise that's mutually beneficial. So if all of that's clearly set out in the contract terms, would be the best outcome. And also making it clear, that they mitigate liability for something like Zoom as well, and expressly state that they're doing that. So that would be the easy, short answer, rather than going through the several different pieces of legislation on call recordings and interception acts and all sorts.
Oh wow, there's acts on interception. That's fascinating.
So there's a lot of legislation around call recording, and whether you can do it with or without consent, and whether you can then use it in court or elsewhere. So there are scenarios where employers, for example, where they're performance managing employees, have used call recording because they've instigated the meeting, they've started the meeting, they've recorded it without informing the employee. So if things go wrong, they can potentially use it to establish, look, this is how it was managed. So there are ways and means in which you can do that, but it's not necessarily the same across all states and territories as to what's allowed and what's not allowed. So hopefully that helps.
I think it really does. I think you've set up some really great ideas. So the first one is in the contract to be very explicit about this third party, the software tool that you're using and how you're going to manage that. Keeping in mind that security within Zoom, it sort of changes and gets better, we hope.
Yes.
Every single day. And I also like your idea of, you're absolutely right, when we call businesses like banks or telcos, they always say before, hey, just letting you know, this call is being recorded for training and purposes. Yeah. So we could even have that on like an opening slide, or just make sure it's part of our housekeeping.
Correct. And also, like I said, you can add it into the invite where you add in, this call will be recorded for record keeping, quality assurance and training purposes. And that's the kind of language those big companies use as well. Yeah. So in addition to whatever you have in the contract with the client, you can have that on the call recording as well. And just take it from there, because I would, and I'm assuming here, which is always dangerous, but with that kind of coaching work, it does require that service to be recorded to enable, it's for the client's benefit, to enable improvement, so they can look back and see where they started off to where they've now got to, so to speak. So it's it's something to be, I think, mindful of in terms of the security aspects, but I also think in terms of the relationship aspects, it's something to be mindful of. I think it's always best to be open, upfront and honest, and obtain consent, especially when there could be potential for personal information to be shared during that conversation as well, and potentially sensitive information as well. So it's always, best to be open and honest about that and obtain consent as well.
Awesome. So don't go inviting Hamish Blake to crash your Zoom parties if you've got it in your contract, because he'd be breaking it. Yeah. Riz, I know your what you've got in your head over all of your years, it's so valuable. So I just, I really appreciate you taking the time out to answer this question for our audience and for our listeners. Where can people go if they'd like to pick your brain even more, or find some of the templates that you've got for solopreneurs, people just like me?
Oh, absolutely. So just www.findwith2dslegal.com. I offer a 20-minute free consultation, no obligations. So if anybody's got any more burning questions, happy to do my best and answer them. And I'm on my socials as well at FindLegal if you want to DM me, if that's your preferred method of communicating as well. So DMing for legal advice, how good. You got no excuse now for making sure everything's set up well. Riz, you're a delight. Thank you so much. No worries, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this bonus episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. And I apologize for the audio. I must have been using my headphones input. So if you were bothered with that, I apologize. Definitely check out what Riz does. She has some amazing templates. She's all over the Instagram and has started a really great Facebook community group to also support people through COVID with questions like this. Look forward to bringing you more bonus episodes as well as the regular content on Monday. And love to see you in the Flip Chart, the free group on Facebook, if you've got questions on anything related to facilitation or growing your facilitation business. Catch you later.